The Honourable Member for Churchill, Kuwanagaski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to discuss the Conservative Party's Opposition Day motion, a deeply unserious solution to a deeply serious problem. Life in this country is becoming increasingly unaffordable for many. For working people, for people on fixed incomes, for people that live here in northern Manitoba and so many parts of our country. But it's clear from the speeches we've heard so far in the House that both the Conservatives and the Liberals are more concerned with the theatrics of being seen to take the issue of the cost of living crisis seriously, but aren't prepared to do what it takes to and to do what is necessary to build an economy that works for everyone. We're all familiar with the statistics. More than half of Canadians are $200 away from insolvency. 1.5 million Canadians are relying on food banks. 1 out of every 4 kids in this country is living in poverty. 1/3 of Canadians live in inadequate, unaffordable, unsuitable homes. First Nations children living on reserve are over 4 times more likely to live in poverty than non-Indigenous children. Almost half of all First Nations children live in poverty, a number that is in contrast to 12% of non-Indigenous, non-racialized, non-newcomer children who live in poverty in Canada. In a lot of ways, this reality is becoming worse. The median hourly wage for Canadian employees was $26 in 2021. It was down from $26.36 in 2020. This is a reality fueled by corporate greed, where prices have increased and Canadians are falling further and further behind, unable to afford groceries, rent, and the basic necessities. 19% of low-income Canadians in 2022 were forced to borrow from friends or relatives or take on more debt to survive. The greedflation crisis is increasing the divisions in our country, and those at the bottom are being asked to take on more while the richest in our country thrive. We still live in a country where the 6 biggest banks can pay out more than $19 billion in bonuses. The median CEO bonus came in at $1.95 million, up nearly 38% from 2020. The typical CEO gets a bonus equal to 170% of the salary of their workers, of their salary, pardon me. But this is the way our system was designed. A couple of years ago, the NDP looked into the 100 richest Canadians, all billionaires, and who they donate to. 56 of them donated to the Liberals, 61 to the Conservatives. And boy, are they getting their money's worth. Both the Liberals and Conservatives refuse to close down tax havens that these billionaires rely on. They both refuse to bring in a wealth tax. When corporate Canada gets out of paying $30 billion using tax avoidance schemes in 1 year, we in the NDP immediately propose solutions to end these tax scams. But it was the Liberals and Conservatives that shut that proposal down. As is tradition, this is the Canada where successive Liberal and Conservative governments have built a system, but we know that it shouldn't have to be this way. Both the Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservative Party have a long record of coddling the ultra-wealthy. Neither the Prime Minister nor the leader of the Conservative Party are willing to admit it, but I'm going to let Canadians in on an open secret. But Liberals and Conservatives largely agree on the majority of issues that affect Canadians' day-to-day lives. There may be some degrees of difference. When the leader of the official opposition was in government, our corporate tax rate was 15%. The current rate under a Liberal government is also 15%. When the Conservatives were in power, they gave billions of dollars to big oil. This Liberal government is doing the same. They've both blocked every effort we've made to have a sane tax policy, a fair tax policy that ensures the rich pay their fair share. This is what they've built, a system that allows 123 corporations to deprive the Canadian people of $30 billion in taxes in 2021 alone. We're seeing increased corporate consolidation. Shaw and Rogers are about to merge. which will only make things more expensive for Canadians. I say this coming from a province where Bell bought out MTS and we were promised more competitive cell phone and internet prices. And all we've seen is prices go up. We know the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry is going to sit idly by while life gets more unaffordable. This type of, dare I call it, champagne socialism, where risk and loss is the responsibility of the taxpayer, but profits and price gouging is just business as usual. That is their record. When we in the NDP saw the corporate greedflation driving food costs, we took action. The cost of food recently hit a 41-year high. People in my generation haven't seen inflation this high ever. We knew action was needed. We called on the Competition Bureau to investigate grocery chain profits. And it may not surprise Canadians that grocery stores that in the past had been caught fixing the price of bread could also rip off Canadians trying to feed their family. But hey, apparently it shocked Liberals and Conservatives. We knew it needed to be done. We knew that there needs to be justice, and we need to make a difference in people's lives. So let's not pretend that this motion isn't anything other than the type of faux populism we've learned to expect from today's Conservatives. They identify some parts of the problem, such as spiraling grocery costs and unaffordable housing, but then turn around and propose the most harmful of solutions that once again place the burden on Canadians rather than on those driving up costs. Capping spending on services Canadians rely on won't allow struggling Canadians to afford groceries. Cutting taxes on the wealthiest people in this country won't mean people will finally be able to buy a house. It will just mean that those with the most are still being asked to help the least. This sort of upside down politics is at the root of what is wrong with our political system. We must imagine a better way. Imagine a government that didn't make it as easy as possible for the richest corporations in our country to park their money in tax havens. Under the Prime Minister's watch, Canadian assets in the top 16 tax haven jurisdictions have gone from $126 billion to a whopping $400 billion. The ultra-wealthy have never had it so good. Imagine we had a windfall tax, something this government has refused to implement. A recent report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer found that the NDP's proposal for a windfall tax on big oil and gas and big box stores, which includes big grocery chains, would generate $4.3 billion over 5 years. Imagine what we could do with that money to help Canadians. Instead, we see the CRA target Canadians who tried to stay afloat during the pandemic, demanding CERB repayments rather than corporations who use the Canada Emergency Wage Benefit to fund stock dividends and buybacks. These sort of misplaced priorities punish already struggling Canadians while robbing those same Canadians of the type of services they could get if we actually took corporate crime seriously in this country. But we don't. We don't even have real fines for when corporations engage in these sort of tax avoidance schemes. You get caught, there's no fine. You just have to pay the taxes you should have paid in the first place. These general anti-avoidance rule violations mean there's no reason for corporations to not try and cheat the system. Worst case scenario, they owe what they should have paid in the first place. We in the NDP have consistently presented a vision where billionaires pay their fair share, and it's Liberal and Conservatives that have worked to block it. We've called on the government to bring in a wealth tax, to raise the corporate tax rate to 18% and beyond, to bring in a windfall tax, to close the capital gains loophole, to stop the billion-dollar giveaways to big oil. This could raise billions of dollars in revenue, taken directly from the ultra-rich and spent on the services that Canadians desperately need. I won't be voting for this motion, and I'm proud that we in the NDP are speaking out against this, calling out both Conservatives and Liberals in their hypocrisy. I'll continue to stand up for the people here in my home, working people, people on fixed incomes who need help now. And I will continue to take on the rich and powerful and the two political parties that enable them. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question Kamal Tyre, the honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member whose speech we just heard today. But certainly we've heard, imagine what an NDP government would look like in Canada, but frankly, we don't need to imagine what that looks like. We're seeing a coalition between the NDP and the Liberals form a very NDP government. But even my home province of British Columbia, we have an NDP government there, and I hear them proudly saying, yeah, go, go. But we just had 2 mills close, one in Prince George that lost 300 employees, another in Chetwynd that lost 200 employees, all because of NDP policy, and this federal government Liberal policy destroyed those mills and the allocation. I guess the mystery to me, and I think what a lot of Canadians are asking, if this Liberal government is so bad, why does the NDP still keep propping this corrupt Prime Minister up?
The honourable member for Churchill, Keewatin-Nagaski.
First, Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge the challenging times that people in northern BC are facing. I have family in Prince George, and I've heard the news of the closures, and certainly hope that support is there. But let me tell this member what the Conservative government, his government, did to my home community of Thompson. They approved the buyout of Vale, a Brazilian multinational, to buy out Inco, a profitable Canadian company that went on to receive supports from Export Development Canada and others, and slashed half the jobs in my home community. No more processing jobs here in Thompson, Manitoba, thanks to what the Harper government did, selling off our resources, selling off good paying Canadian jobs. So I will not take any lessons from Conservatives when it comes to standing up for good working class jobs in the resource sector. And I am proud of the work that the NDP is doing nationally to call on corporations, including those that are shutting down jobs in our communities, to pay what they owe, particularly those that have seen excessive profits, including in mining, oil and gas, and other resource areas. I hope they will join us.